and some more right after this.
You are Locked On Bulls, your daily podcast on the Chicago Bulls, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Bulls, member of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. That's Pat, the designer, host, and creator of the Windy City Breeze. I'm Haize, host and creator of Chicago Bulls and Chicago Bears Central. Nonetheless, we're here today to talk about our Bulls, but more specifically, the details of the new CBA have come out. And we're going to break that down and what that could mean for the Chicago Bulls. So first up, we're going to talk about this. The NBA and the Players Association are likely to allow high school players to start entering the draft again. Pat, this could happen as early as 2024. Now, why this may be important for the Chicago Bulls specifically is the fact that 2024 is when the Chicago Bulls do have their very own first-round pick again. Now, while that pick hopefully isn't a super high pick, that could turn the 2024 draft into what would basically be a double draft, because you'll have the college players coming in from the season before, and now the newly allowed to enter early high school players that could go towards the bottom of that draft, meaning that the Bulls could get quite an upside pick in that draft. Now, that's if it does go into effect as early. That is when the new CBA is set to go into effect, but they could still delay allowing high school players to enter the draft again. Pat, what do you think about this?
I think we want the Bulls to be picking players like that, right? Like, especially with, and it makes so much sense, right? Remember, we're talking about a forward-thinking GM. We're talking about a forward-thinking organization. We're talking about a forward-thinking league that the NBA is now becoming. When you think of these high school players coming out, right, guess what's going to happen to them? Hey, unless you're like Kobe or Bron or, right, like KG, you're going to see a lot of these guys, hey, come on up. Spend some time with the Windy City Bulls. You'll see a lot of second-round picks that could be long-term future picks. All of a sudden, teams are going to come up to them and be like, listen, we can get you into the NBA right now, get you drafted. We'll send you up and down a little bit so you spend a little time, get a little development here, learn a little bit of something about the league. You're going to see a lot more long-term plays in NBA basketball, and it's going to kind of change how we have to switch our mindset on players coming into the league. Right now, you're seeing a lot of guys that are fresh out of college, and we're like, hey, listen, you got to make an impact day one, play one. Like, you're that level of player if you've been taken that high. When you start adding high school guys into the equation, you might have a team with the first pick in the draft say, this is a long-term play. We know he's going to turn into something. We're going to work him with our G League team and with our NBA team, and in 5 years, he's going to be a dominant basketball player in this league. I think that's going to be really interesting to see how they kind of shape this all out. But I've never been opposed to the high school thing, right? Listen, at the end of the day, if you pick the wrong high school player, you're dumb. Guess what? The Bulls were dumb.
Yeah. And you know, Steve on the chat says Bronny somewhere plotting. Keep in mind, the earliest as this could go into effect is the 2024 draft. Bronny would already be a year into college by then. So this actually is not going to
be in the league by then.
Yeah, he's not. This is not going to get Bronny in the league any earlier. So this is actually there was some speculation on that yesterday when CHGO actually talked about this, and they even said like, oh well, LeBron somewhere plot. Like, hey, did you do the adding on this? Like, Bronny's already going to be in the league by then. Player, like, calm down.
If his daddy connections as good he is, doggone.
Exactly. He'll be 19 years old by then. He'll already be in the draft. But with that being said, the way that I look at it is this, especially for the Chicago Bulls specifically. I love what you said, especially on teams, long-term plays, things like that. But specifically for the Bulls, when you don't have your own first-round pick this upcoming draft, so looking at the next draft, it's like, hey, if the Bulls can get, they don't have a second-round pick, so they only have their first-round pick. But if they can get a talent that would any other draft be a lottery pick, and they can get that in the 20s because just the sheer number of talents that are coming into the league, that's good. That's going to be dope. That's going to be dope.
And I think you look at it, right, like think about it. In baseball, right, there's always hope, right? Where you've got some kid at minor league that's your hope. NBA teams want to sell tickets on hope. Unfortunately, our owner, Jerry Reinsdorf, said the best thing you can do is finish in second place because it always gives you hope that you'll be first place next. Like, It's a tough statement to say, Jerry, but especially when a lot of our teams ride
Jerry,
on you.
Jerry basically be having those takes. It's like, listen, shut up. That's basically
But at the end of the day, right, like you're going to see a team. Listen, you're going to see a team that has no shot. OKC, Orlando. Oh, no, Orlando might be a little bit better this year with Paolo. I ain't going to lie to you. He looked like he got it. But, one of those teams, and they're going to say, listen, we're not going to be good for a while. There's no shot we're going to be good for a while. We're going to go with a long-term play here. We could find a guy that is a role player right now, or we could go with a long-term play here and say in 5 years, this kid is going to be dominant. Now, is there a lot of guesswork? Does that change your scouting? Does that change it? Absolutely it does. But guess what? That's how a lot of sports do it. It's how the NHL does it. That's how MLB does it. The NFL just signed a contract with it's not the AFL, what's the Rocks, the XFL, right? To where if you don't make an NFL contract, you automatically, I think, get an XFL. Like if you get signed and then they cut you and you don't get a team, you automatically get an XFL shot so that you can prove yourself and then go back to playing the NFL. Like all these teams are trying to develop a minor league, and it's good to see that the NBA is doing it. And I'll tell you what, I'm really excited about it because AK's already showed so much forward thinking with the system we currently have. We're going to have at least 2 high school players right out the bat on this mug.
Oh, for sure. Okay, do you think this helps or hurts the development of the G League some? Because now you're all going to have players that are drafting teams that are drafting players younger, but are they going to be more incentivized to get those teams on their NBA roster sooner rather than letting them cook down a little bit in the G League for a year or so? Or do you think it's ultimately going to help the G League?
I mean, here's the thing, right? And this is the question that I ask you. It's the question that I ask the chat. Maybe you're not fair, but the average person, right? Are they watching more G League basketball or are they watching more high school basketball? High school talent. The top names in high school, right? Like,
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like more people are tuning in to see what. I'm gonna be honest with you. I was watching Michael Porter Jr. when he was in 8th grade. Like more people are tuning in to see what the next young talent is, to see, oh, this guy got it, than there are to say, I want to see what's going on in the NBA G League. I think this boosts everything for the G League because guess what? Now your top high school prospect might be in the G League. Or, I mean, it could be, I think it's all a help to boost ratings. But I think at the end of the day, right, like you're going to see players that you want to see start off in the minors, essentially, and work their way onto the team. Because rookies can do it for what, 2 years? You can bring them back and forth for 2 years, basically. Ain't that how it is?
Well, I think you can. I mean, there are some third-year players you do see down there, but I think they can deny the assignment at that point.
Yeah, at a certain point, they can deny the assignment.
Yeah.
So I think you'll see some teams that are like, listen, we're going to draft you. You're going to be out of high school. You're going to make a whole lot of money because you're still a draft pick. And guess what? You're going to play down here for a couple of years. You're going to get your game together. You're going to get your body ready. And then when you're ready, we're going to bring you up to the NBA. Yeah. And that's going to create hope in organizations. That's going to create a belief in a lot of organizations, and it's going to make the G League relevant.
Yeah. I mean, I think it could be a catch-22. At the end of the day, I think that anything can help the G League, right? The fact of the matter is that you have talent. If you're coming in younger in the league, which means that there is a bigger chance that you do need more time to develop, which is what the G League is for. So it's going to be some exciting basketball down there. And while I don't know if it's going to help every team per se, I do think the teams that do decide to draft young, that maybe do already have a team that's playoff team or whatever, and they're like, hey, rather than throwing this youngster out here, let's go ahead and let's see how he does a month in the G League. It's going to make a lot of those matchups a little bit better for sure. Yeah.
No, it definitely is. It's going to be, I'm telling you, dog, like I've never been opposed to the high school game. I think a lot of teams went away from it because they screwed up. Right? Like, but you screwed up in spots that it didn't make sense for you to screw up, right? Like when the Bulls took Eddie Curry. Eddie Curry got out-rebounded in a high school game where he was the biggest dude on the court.
By far. By far. He, like, if you ever go back and look at Eddie Curry playing in high school, it literally looks like somebody's 30-year-old uncle came out there to hoop up some youngsters, facts. Bro. Like it was.
So it's like, listen, if you looked at that and you thought that was the right pick, you chose wrong. Teams are going to screw up. We don't kill these teams for screwing up for one more year after that. Oh, we took him young, right? Like at the end of the day, I hope Pat Will turns into a great player, 18 to 25 points a game. And that was a wide range. And, 8 rebounds and 3 blocks. But at the end of the day, right, Patrick Williams was 19 years old when we drafted him. What's the difference? If he had a late birthday, he'd still be in high school.
There you go. That's a good point. All right. Well, there you go. Let us know down below what you guys think about the NBA moving the date up again to where high school players can go back to entering the NBA draft. But next up, got to talk to you guys about BetOnline. And so BetOnline is your number one source for all your pro and college football betting needs and sports info this season. Find all the latest football developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts, including this year's opening week games. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. The latest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline is where the game starts. All right, Patrick. That's never not going to be funny, by the way. But outside of that, we also got to update that the NBA is trying to, some of the owners do want to make the luxury tax more punitive for teams. Now, it seems like there's been considerable pushback from the Players Association on instituting a hard cap, but making that luxury tax a little bit more punitive. What do you think about that aspect of it?
I think they're still trying to clamp down on teams basically saying we're going to make a workaround so that we can get 17 all-stars on our team, right? Like that's really what this is. I think we've seen these teams work around it enough that it won't be an issue. And we've seen teams just not care, right? Like the Golden State Warriors don't care that they're in the luxury tax.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, like, if you're winning, you're not gonna get like, what's the hard? Unless you go hard cap, right? I think that's the part where like
that's the only way to get true parity is to just make it a hard cap. Period.
And that's I think back to like when the Blackhawks won, right? They had a hard cap, so you just couldn't re-sign some of your best players on that team. All of a sudden, Blackhawks win a Stanley Cup with Dustin Byfuglien, and we can't bring back Dustin Byfuglien. He was a major piece on that team.
Yeah.
That all of a sudden had to be shipped out because there was a hard cap, right? So, like, it does create, I'll say this, right? It sucks. And the NBA at one point, but I think it's this, right? The NBA at one point needed stars to be in the major city. Now you're to a point where no matter what city you're in, there's a possibility you have a star.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the biggest thing, right? So I wouldn't be mad at it. I think it would be interesting to see how the NBA would deal with it, right? Because, I mean, you think about it, right? You would basically destroy dynasties. You wouldn't have a team that went for 20 years or 18 or 15 years, right? That of just pure dominance because you wouldn't be able to keep paying everybody.
Yeah. I mean, it'll get way too costly and expensive. But the way I look at it is because you have some teams, like you said, like the Warriors, that they're gonna pay regardless. Whatever it is, they're winning, they're gonna pay. But I think that this makes it a little bit more for the smaller teams. Let's say for some example, give me a small market team. Is Charlotte considered a small market? Okay, OKC. Let's say OKC, Giddey, Chet, Shea, let's say they turn into a championship team. Let's just say it. I'm just for the nature of the conversation. Yep. It's going to be harder for that team, that smaller market team, to keep them together because as you go longer and longer and keep going into the luxury tax, you're paying higher and higher percentages on that luxury tax. Whereas if you have a team like Golden State, they're going to make so much money, you can make them pay a 1-for-2 rate on their contracts, and the owner's literally going to be like, all right, cool, I'll sign off on it. Are we still winning titles? We're going to sign off on it.
You know what? It depends on how you structure the cap itself. With the luxury tax, maybe, unless you make it so like egregious, but like if you structure the cap the right way as well around it, it's going to make it a better world for your smaller market teams because you're going to have to trade those players to somebody. And you would rather trade those players to teams that have high draft picks. Those are usually your smaller market, pretty beatable teams. Unless
I don't think that makes anything. How does that make it better for a smaller market team? If you're saying that a smaller market team is going to have to trade their players away because they can't afford to keep re-signing them,
so are the big market teams, right? That's what I'm saying. You have to, if you're going to implement this, to me, you've got to change your cap structure so that you can't just go over to keep your players.
Oh, well, no, they're not. They're never going to change that. Keep in mind that part of this is the NBA is trying to incentivize players keeping their homegrown and drafted content. So they're never going to change it to where I don't think they're ever going to change the cap structure itself in a way that you're mentioning to where, because keep in mind there's a large gap between going over the cap and hitting the luxury tax. Those are two different things. So I don't think that the big market teams, if you're a big market and you're making so much money, especially if you're looking at the teams that also own their own arena and they're making money either way, like to subsidize, I don't think it's going to negatively impact them. If they're building a championship team, they're going to be willing to spend that money.
I think you're willing to spend it, right? But the NBA has to make a line where you can't spend anymore. I think that's the only way you do it, right? Like you can increase the tax, you can increase, but you have to create that line where they can't, like, you can't keep doing this.
See, and that's unless they change it, because right now it is. I think if you're over the cap 3 consecutive years, it goes to like a 2.5 tax, which is huge. But we're seeing teams pay it. But the thing is like
Golden State's gonna pay it.
Yeah, but unless they are going to limit it in the way of saying, hey, you can only be in the luxury tax consecutively for 6 years. Yeah. After that, you got to get down under that. Like that's the only way. The Players Association nor certain NBA owners, I don't think would ever sign off on that. Because keep in mind, you have to have they have to be in agreement. I can't see the Players Association ever agreeing to something that restrictive.
Here's why the Players Association would be interesting, but possibly right because it's going to increase. I mean, at the end of the day, right, it still increases the money in the players' pockets because you go to a smaller market team. Guess what? You got to pay me more to stay here. But on top of that, right, I think you would have more owners on board with it than not, because in the NBA, unless you have that superstar player, and history's proven this, unless you have a top 5 player in the NBA, you're probably not winning an NBA championship. So those teams that don't have those top 5 players are going to be like, no, yeah, that's okay. I'm okay with that, because now all of a sudden there's more players in the pool that we can go after and that we have a shot to get, because they're going to have to move on from these guys if they sign them to them big deals.
But that's the thing. That doesn't change anything for small market teams, because the large market teams are always going to have more money and be willing to spend more.
Yeah.
So
it's going to be an interesting dynamic, but I just think, right, like it seems like now the NBA is trying to go towards making the playing field fair for all the teams. That's how it feels to me with the new terms on the table. Because it's like you said, right? Like at the end of the day, New York is going to have more money, whether they suck or not, than anybody.
Well, we're not worried about New York, because literally they will spend all their cap money on a player that's going to give them 8 and 6.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. But I mean, like they'll be able to go out and the Lakers or something, right? Mm. Like no matter where the team is, they're always going to do well. It feels to me like the NBA is trying to get to a point where, like, okay, Orlando hasn't been relevant in 15 years. We need them to still be a major player in this for us to keep moving forward, right? You don't want to have those teams that you like forget are in the league.
But you got to keep in mind, too, I think one of the things with this and why you see it says that some owners are pushing for it, because keep in mind, all the teams that don't pay the luxury tax, they get to split the revenue from the teams that did pay the luxury tax. Well, yeah. So you're going to see some teams that just, regardless, they aren't going to pay anything because they're like, oh, we can get an extra $10 million this season? Yeah. Go ahead and bring it. Don't even worry about it. Go ahead, and say you want to have a $230 million salary cap? Go ahead, bro. Don't even worry about it. Go ahead. Do you want us to send you somebody? You need another player? You need us to see you? Like, that's what you're going to get. But I do think that the NBA eventually, I don't know if it happens this CBA, but I think eventually it has to get to a area where if you're re-signing your own drafted talent, it counts less towards the luxury tax. That's where I think you can create parity. Because let's say Chet does turn into the next level superstar, but they have to be in the luxury tax to pay a team. But because he makes $30 million a year, only 5% of that counts towards the luxury tax because they drafted him and he stayed there. Maybe they do something like that.
That definitely could be in play, right? Because then you're again preaching keeping your homegrown talent. I think the question is, right, like what road do you want to go down? Do you want to go down more of the NHL path, or do you want to go down kind of like baseball's path, where like there's basically no cap? There's pay anybody whatever anybody wants.
But see, if they do that, there's literally going to be 4 teams that are in contention every year, and that's it. In basketball, that's it.
Yeah.
I think that. I don't know if eventually maybe they just make the luxury tax the hard cap and say, listen, we're doing away with everything else. This is the most that you can spend, because that is the only way that I can see you putting the genie back in the bottle. But I don't know if the Players Association ever agrees to something like that.
Probably not, right? Because now you're capping the amount of money I can make.
Yeah.
So
we're not really capping the amount. I mean, there's already a cap to the amount of money. Keep in mind, the NBA of all the national sports has the most restrictive policy as far as even what percentages of increases you can give. So it's already good. Like, they're not doing away with that aspect of it. So it's already capped. You can already only get a certain contract, the max of what you can get. So that I don't think is restricting the amount of money. It's just restricting how it's spread out at that point.
Yeah.
So
it'll be interesting to see, dog. I ain't gonna lie to you, because I'm just like, I want to see kind of where, because like we've kind of hit that point where the NBA seems like, okay, we need to make another major pivot. And I really want to see what that pivot is going to be. It seems like it's like, okay, now we've gone too far one direction. We need to kind of get it back. We don't need to be the 90s again, but we need to kind of get it back where where we got some 20-year players in a place. That's how it feels like the direction they're trying to go. So I want to see kind of how they're going to do it. It's going to be interesting to watch, man.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to watch. Last topic of the day, Pat, before we go, the NBA is also something that we did predict here, going to work in mental health listed as the same as a physical injury. So meaning a pulled hammy is going to be the same as a mental health day. It's going to be listed on the injury report the same. You still get your money. Ben Simmons is a big part of that. But then also they're going to try to work in something to where they can have basically a bank of money to take care of former players after they retire and go on to do that. What do you think about those two aspects potentially of the new CBA?
I like the mental health aspect, bringing it in, right? Because I think that there's a lot of stuff that these players go through in specific cities, right? They do make a ton of money. They do make they are paid to do a specific job, which is just being out there and being on the court. But at the end of the day, right, like, bro, some days must call off their job just because you need a day.
Yeah.
Like, why do we assume that the NBA players are any different, especially in an 82-game season, especially in a regular season that essentially doesn't matter? Like, at this point, right, like, you win 38 games, you're good. you're making some sort of playoff. So it's like, unless you're in the West. But I just feel like, right, like, this is something that makes sense because there's a lot of times where players just need a day. There's a lot of things that players are going through on the day in, day out that we don't hear about. So it's good to see the NBA taking this initiative. The only thing that I don't want to see is it being abused the way that Ben Simmons did.
You and the Ben Simmons. I know every time Ben Simmons
real beef with
we know. We're at some point we do need to have that conversation on this platform because I love your take on it, and we don't have the time to get into it right now, but I think eventually we do need to get into that. But yeah, I think the mental health, like you know, I started in podcasting talking about mental health in the Black community. It's literally what got me into podcasting 5 years ago. So like. I love the fact that as a culture, we're really moving forward. Like even military now is working in mental health days like that. But once that happened, it's like, everything else needs to move forward.
Yeah, for real.
So I'm super happy that the NBA is considering that. I'm happy that it's on the forefront, that it's something that they are looking very well into because it needs to happen. Because like you said, these players go through something, and it's something that unless you're in that, we will never fully understand it. We can understand the generalities of having mental health issues, but you know, it's good that they have it worked in there. Now, as far as the equity part of it for former players and helping take care of players, listen, I love it, bro. Like you know, you got to take, like, these players to put their mind, especially ones that played back when the contracts were God, you were getting $5 million and you were the highest paid player in the league at that point in time. Like,
Hey.
I would love to see something like that.
I would say go back even further than that, right? Like you think about the building blocks of this league. You think of all the ABA players that came over, right? Like I mean, here's the thing. I don't know if you have. I've literally just met ABA players and they just live in regular lives now. Like they like not like they went to work after they were done playing in the NBA. Like it was like I met excuse me, I met I think he was Dr. J's backup point guard in the ABA. And I was like, man, what'd you do after the league? And he was like, oh, I worked at Amco for 30 years. I'm like, what? And
That's
are pillars,
crazy, bro.
These are pillars of your league, right? These are the people that your league had that were the building blocks of your league, especially the ABA players, because the NBA was going under.
Yeah.
So like I think it's good to see them giving back to a lot of these players, and I like to see that. And it's a yearly stipend essentially, right? Like I think it breaks down to like depending on how far back it goes or something like that. I think it was like 12 or 15 extra grand a year for some of these players, right? Like that could change
somebody's life, bro.
Somebody's life, right? Like you getting the extra, like all of a sudden, like I could barely make my bills now. I'm doing good. Yeah, I mean, so like I really appreciate the NBA for taking this initiative. I mean, I feel like you could send a little more their way, but hey, like there's a lot of players in history. You know what I mean? There's a lot of players.
Yeah.
And sure. If you, I think there needs to be this too. If you still associated with the league, you don't get it. It's like, bro, what? Michael Jordan's not getting a stipend out of here. We not doing that
Michael
right
Jordan
now,
don't need to get no stipend, bro. But
we're not doing that right now. But he should, right? Because he's a former player. Like,
but come on now. If anybody's doing good, we know Jordan's doing quite well.
I think it should be something where if you need that, and it might be right. I don't know exactly how they're gonna do it, but I think how the NFL does it, where yes, if you reach a certain amount of years, you get this much money no matter what. And I think they're doing that. But if you need a specific amount of help, there should be something you can kind of go to and say, okay, I need a little more help here, a little more help there. And the NBA kind of can work it out with your specific situation.
For sure. But all right, bro, that is it, man. Go ahead and send us off, bro. Send these people on their day.
Hey, man, y'all have a great day out here. Stay blessed. Praise God. Follow us on everything at Locked On Bulls. You can follow me on everything at Pat the Designer. Got a lot of dope stuff coming y'all way, man. New stew. Y'all stay safe.
You can follow me at CEO Haize, CEO Haize. And thank you for making Locked On Bulls your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, go and check on Locked On NBA, where the Locked On experts break down all the latest news and developments going on around the NBA in 30 minutes or less. But for Pat the Designer, I'm Haize. This is Locked On Bulls, and we out, y'all. Peace.